Chains dragged across wet stone. A man dropped to his knees in the mud, shoved forward by two guards with iron rods. His head hung low. His back was torn open, welts from shoulder to waist. The crowd barely looked at him. Another body. Another sale. Another nobody. But one woman stopped. She stood at the edge of the auction block, clutching a single copper coin. The last thing she owned in this world. She couldn't afford food, let alone a slave. But something about the way he lifted his head, the way his eyes found hers through the crowd. Not begging, not broken, watching. Her name was Alara. She stepped forward, raised that one coin, and bought him. A single copper piece for a man the entire supernatural world was trying to keep in chains. What she brought home that night was not a slave. Stay with me on this one. She half carried him down a dirt road for over a mile. He was tall, taller than any man she'd seen up close, and heavy enough that every step made her knees buckle. The chains clinked with each stumble. His bare feet dragged through the gravel, and he didn't make a sound. Not a grunt, not a groan, nothing. Alara lived in a cottage at the far edge of the village. If you could call it a cottage. The roof leaked in 3 places. The door didn't latch without a rope tied around the handle. The garden out front had gone to weeds 2 seasons ago. She'd stopped caring about it around the same time the village stopped caring about her. She used to be a healer, a good one. People came from other towns to see her. She knew which roots brought a fever down, which poultice closed a wound clean, which tea could ease a woman through a hard labor. She had a gift for it. Steady hands. A calm voice. The kind of person you wanted beside you when things went wrong. Then a nobleman's son died on her table. Infection took him. Nothing she could have stopped. But the family needed someone to blame, and a healer with no husband and no family name made a convenient target. They called her a poisoner. The village believed it. Overnight, she went from trusted to cursed. That was 2 years ago. Now she lived on the edge of everything. Scraping by on wild herbs she sold at the market when anyone would buy them. Most days they wouldn't. She eased the man onto the floor beside the hearth and lit a fire. He sat where she put him, back against the wall, eyes open. Those eyes, they tracked her across the room the way a hawk tracks movement on the ground. Not hostile, not grateful, just aware, like he was cataloging everything she did. She boiled water, tore a clean rag into strips, knelt beside him. "I'm going to clean your back," she said. "It's going to sting." He said nothing. She started working. The welts were deep, layered, like he'd been beaten over days, not hours. Old wounds under new ones. She'd seen bad injuries before. These were something else. Whoever had done this wasn't punishing him. They were trying to break him, and they'd failed. She could see that. His jaw was set. His breathing was even. He sat perfectly still while she cleaned wounds that should have had him screaming. She noticed the chains next. Not ordinary iron. The metal was darker, almost black, and covered in markings she didn't recognize. Thin lines etched into the surface, looping and crossing in patterns that didn't look like any language she knew. She tried to find a clasp, a hinge, keyhole. Nothing. The chains wrapped his wrists and ran down to his ankles like they'd been welded shut. "These won't come off," she said, more to herself than to him. "No," he said, "they won't." His voice was low, rough, like he hadn't used it in a long time. She looked up at him. This was the first word he'd spoken since she'd bought him. "Do you have a name?" she asked. A pause. Then, "Kale. Kale. All right. I'm Alara." She wrung the bloody rag into the water basin. "I should tell you something. I spent my last coin on you. I don't know why I did it. I don't have food for tomorrow. I barely have food for tonight. So if you were expecting some kind of comfortable situation here, this isn't it." He looked at her, and for the first time something shifted in his face. Not a smile. Not quite. But the hardness loosened, just for a second. "You bought a slave you can't feed," he said. Looks that way. Why? She didn't have an answer. She'd asked herself the same thing the entire walk home. Something had pulled her forward. Something about the way he'd looked at her. Not begging, not pleading, just seeing her. In a world that had made her invisible, this man in chains had looked at her like she was real. She wasn't going to say that out loud. Get some rest, she said. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow. She moved to the other side of the room and sat against the wall. The fire crackled. Outside, something moved in the tree line. Probably a fox, probably nothing. But she noticed Cale tilt his head toward the sound. Nostrils flaring, body going still in a way that had nothing to do with exhaustion. He wasn't listening the way a man listens. He was listening the way an animal does. She told herself she'd imagined it. She pulled a thin blanket over her knees, closed her eyes, and tried to sleep. She didn't notice that every stray dog in the village had moved to the far side of the road. Not one of them would come within 100 yards of her cottage. Not anymore. 3 days passed. Quiet ones. Cale healed faster than he should have. Wounds that should have taken weeks to close were already scabbing over by the second morning. By the third day, the deepest welts on his back had faded to thin pink lines. Alara changed his bandages and said nothing, but she was a healer. She knew what human skin does and how fast it does it. This wasn't human. She noticed other things too. Small things. He never slept with his back to the door. Every time a bird landed on the roof, his head turned before the sound reached her ears. When she cut her thumb slicing bread, he went still, nostrils flaring, pupils widening, and then caught himself, like a man pulling back from a ledge. She didn't ask. She wasn't sure she wanted the answer. They fell into a rhythm, though. She foraged. He repaired the door latch with a piece of wire he found in the yard. She made a thin soup from wild onions and the last of her dried herbs. He ate without complaint. They didn't talk much, but the silences between them weren't heavy. They were just quiet, like two people who didn't need to fill every moment with noise. But the healing and the strange instincts weren't her biggest problem. Not by a long shot. The biggest one showed up on the fourth day. 2 men on horseback came up the road just after midday. Alara knew them. Enforcers for Lord Heron, the local landowner who controlled the village, the market, the debt books, and just about everything else that mattered. She owed him. She'd been behind on payments for months. Heron was not a patient man. The bigger one, a man named Gregor, swung off his horse and walked straight to the door. He didn't knock. He kicked it open. "Where's my lord's money, healer?" Alara stood in the middle of the room. "I don't have it. Not yet." Gregor looked around the cottage. His eyes landed on Cale, sitting in the corner, chains pooled at his feet. "What's this? You can't pay your debts, but you can buy yourself a slave." He was a copper piece. "Then sell him. Lord Heron wants what's owed, or he takes the cottage. Those are the terms." Gregor stepped forward and shoved the table. It slammed into the wall and a clay pot shattered on the floor. His partner moved through the room, pulling jars off shelves, dumping her herbs, her dried roots, her tinctures, everything she had left. Alara didn't move. She'd been through this before. Fighting back made it worse. She stood still and let them wreck the only things she owned. Then Gregor reached for her. His hand closed around her arm and yanked her forward. She stumbled, and that's when the chains moved. Now here's the thing. Cale hadn't moved in 3 days. He'd sat in that corner like a man with nowhere to go and nothing left to fight for. But the second Gregor's hand touched Alara, something changed. The chains snapped taut. Cale stood up and the room felt smaller. He was massive, not just tall, broad. The kind of build that doesn't come from labor. Comes from something else entirely. Something bred into the bone. He crossed the room in 2 steps. Gregor didn't even get his hand off Alara before Cale's chained fist slammed into his chest. The sound it made was like a horse kicking a barn door. Gregor flew backward. hit the far wall, slid to the floor. The second man reached for his sword. Cale grabbed the blade with his bare hand, wrapped his fingers around it and held it still. Blood ran between his knuckles. He didn't flinch. He just looked at the man. And whatever the enforcer saw in those eyes made him let go of his own weapon and step back. Gregor crawled toward the door. But he stopped. He was staring at Cale's wrists, at the chains, at those markings. Those runes, Gregor whispered. I've seen those before, on the old scrolls. Those are the king's chains. Silence. Gregor scrambled to his feet and ran. His partner was already on his horse. They were gone in under a minute. Alara stood in the middle of her ruined cottage, her arm still red where Gregor had grabbed her. She looked at Cale. He was breathing hard. Blood dripped from his hand onto the floor. What did he mean? She said. The king's chains. What did he mean by that? Cale didn't answer. He sat back down. His eyes closed. Whatever had risen up in him settled back beneath the surface, like something diving deep into black water. She wrapped his hand. The cut should have needed stitches. By the time she finished bandaging it, it had already stopped bleeding. She didn't say a word about it. The next 2 days were worse than the first 3. Word had spread. Alara could feel it. The woman at the well pulled her bucket up and walked away when she saw Alara coming. The baker's wife crossed the road. A group of men stood outside the tavern and watched her pass, then huddled together whispering the moment she turned her back. She caught one word. Just one. King. She didn't know what it meant yet. Not fully. But the village did. Or at least it thought it did. And fear travels faster than truth in a small town. On the 6th night, Cale finally said something unprompted. They were sitting by the fire, their new routine, one on each side of the room, and he spoke without looking at her. You need to know something. The men who sold me didn't capture me by accident. I was betrayed by the people closest to me. My own council. My own blood. They wanted me gone and they had help. Powerful help. Whoever helped them will come looking. It's only a matter of time. Alara stared at the fire. How much time? Not much. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire and watched the shadows. Cale slept across the room or seemed to. Quiet. Still. Just a man resting. Outside, the village was dark. The enforcers hadn't come back. No one had. For the first time in months, nothing was banging on her door. She found herself mending a torn curtain, pulling a needle through fabric. Slow, steady work. The fire popped. Cale's breathing was low and even. The cottage felt safe, almost warm, like the worst of it had passed. She set the mending down and looked at him in the firelight. Whatever he was, he'd protected her. That was more than anyone in this village had done in 2 years. She didn't need to understand him. She just needed to get through tomorrow. She leaned back against the wall and let herself breathe. Felt like the worst was over. It wasn't. The knock came before dawn. 3 sharp raps on the door. Calm. Almost polite. Alara opened it and found a woman standing in the gray light. She was tall, thin, dressed in black robes that didn't belong to any tailor in this region. Her hair was dark and pulled back tight, and she had the kind of face that looked beautiful until you looked at her eyes. Her eyes were wrong, too still, like a painting of a person instead of the person themselves. She smiled. Found you. She wasn't looking at Alara. She was looking past her. Cale. My name is Seraphine, the woman said. She stepped inside without being invited. And I believe you have something that belongs to me. Believe me, this is where the whole thing changes. Seraphine moved through the cottage like she owned it. She ran a finger along the table edge, looked at the herbs on the floor, looked at Cale, who was standing now, his body rigid, his jaw locked. You look terrible, Seraphine said to him. But then, captivity never suited you. Cale said nothing, but Alara saw something she hadn't seen before. Fear. Not the kind that makes you run. the kind that makes you go very, very still. Whatever Seraphine was, she scared him. And nothing had scared him until now. Seraphine turned to Alara. I'll make this simple. I want him. I'll pay you. More gold than you've ever held in your life. She placed a leather pouch on the table. Clinked heavy. Take the gold. Walk away. Forget this ever happened. Alara looked at the pouch. Then at Kale. Then at Seraphine. No, she said. Seraphine's smile didn't change, but something behind it did. You don't understand what you're refusing. I understand fine. He's not yours to take. He's not yours either, girl. You bought him with a copper coin at a market auction. You think that makes him yours? Seraphine laughed. It was a sharp sound. You have no idea what's standing in your cottage. Then tell me. Seraphine glanced at Kale. Shall I? Or would you like to do the honors? The silence stretched. Then Kale spoke. His voice was different now. Not rough. Not broken. Clear. Like a man who had spent a very long time choosing his words carefully. My name is Kale Voss, he said. I am the Lycan king, ruler of the 7 packs. The chains I'm wearing were forged by the witch standing in front of you. She helped my own council betray me. They drugged me, bound me, and sold me into slavery to make sure I never came back. Alara stared at him. The runes on these chains suppress my shift, he continued. I can't transform. I can't heal fully. I can't command. As long as I wear them, I'm just a man. That's what she wanted. Seraphine clapped her hands together, slow and mocking. There it is. The whole tragic story. She looked at Alara. Now you understand. He's not a slave. He's a deposed king. And deposed kings attract very dangerous attention. Every enemy he's ever made, and believe me, there are many, will come looking for him. And they'll come here, to this little cottage. To you. She let that sit. Take the gold, Seraphine said again. This is the kind offer. The next one won't be. Alara looked at the pouch of gold on the table. Enough to feed her for years. Enough to leave this village. Start over somewhere no one knew her name. She picked up the pouch, opened the drawstring, looked at the coins inside. Then she threw it at Seraphine's feet. Get out of my house. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next is the part no one saw coming. Seraphine left, but she didn't leave quietly. She stood at the door and delivered her threat with the same calm smile she'd worn since she arrived. I'm going to burn this village to the ground, she said. Every house, every shop, every person who lives here. And when I'm done, I'll come back for him. You could have stopped it. Remember that. The door closed. Alara's hands were shaking. She's not bluffing, Kale said. She has corrupted wolves. Lycans who broke from the packs and serve her now. She'll send them tonight. Maybe tomorrow. But she'll send them. Alara sat down. Her legs couldn't hold her anymore. Why didn't you tell me? Any of it. Because anyone who knows what I am becomes a target. I was trying to keep you out of it. Well, that's done now. He nodded. Yes, it is. She looked at the chains on his wrists. Can they be broken? Only by a human, he said. No supernatural blood. The runes are designed to resist any being with power. A human hand is the one thing they can't fight. That's me. That's you. She reached for the chains. The moment her fingers touched the metal, the runes flared. A dull red glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. She pulled. Nothing. She twisted. Nothing. The chains held. There's a lock, Kale said. He turned his wrist. Deep in the tangle of chain, barely visible, there was a small indentation. Not a keyhole. Something else. A flat, circular shape pressed into the metal. Alara stared at it. She'd seen that shape before. She reached into her pocket. She didn't have much left in there. A scrap of cloth. A dried sprig of lavender. And one thing she'd almost forgotten, the copper coin. The one she'd used to buy him at the auction. The vendor had given it back to her. "Keep it," he'd said. "We both know he's not worth anything." She pressed the coin into the indentation. It fit. Exactly. The runes flared white. A sound came from the chains. A low hum that rose until the walls rattled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The fire in the hearth bent sideways like something invisible was pressing against it. Then a crack, like a bone snapping. The chains split down the middle and fell to the floor in two pieces. The moment they hit the ground, the air in the room changed, like a pressure valve releasing, like a door opening into a much larger space than the room should contain. Cale dropped to one knee. His body shook, not from pain, from something unlocking, something massive and ancient and barely contained rushing back into him like a river breaking through a dam. His shoulders broadened. His spine straightened. The scars on his back, the ones she'd been treating for a week, sealed and vanished in seconds. His eyes, those watching, careful eyes, turned gold. Not gold like amber, gold like fire. He stood up and he was not the same man. He was taller. His presence filled the room the way heat fills a forge. Every instinct Alara had told her to step back. This was not the quiet, chained man she'd shared a fire with for 6 days. This was something older. Something that commanded obedience just by standing in a room. She didn't step back. She held her ground. He looked at her, and for just a moment, underneath all that power, she saw him. Cale. The man who'd fixed her door latch with a scrap of wire. The man who'd eaten her terrible soup without complaint. He was still in there. "Thank you," he said. His voice was deeper now, fuller, like it had more of him behind it. Outside, the howling started. Seraphine's wolves, coming through the trees. Fast. A lot of them. The sound grew from one direction, then two, then all around them. They were surrounded. Cale looked at Alara. "Stay behind me." The first wolf hit the cottage door and blew it off its hinges. Black-furred, eyes red, jaws wide. It lunged straight at Alara. Cale caught it midair with one hand. His fingers closed around its throat and he threw it through the wall. The cottage shook. Two more came through the gap. He met them both. No weapons, no chains. Just his hands and a fury that had been locked away for months. He fought them out through the broken wall and into the clearing. For more came from the tree line. Then 3 more. Then 2. They kept coming. Seraphine had sent everything she had. He shifted. And this is the part you need to picture. One moment, a man. The next, something else. Bigger than any wolf. Bigger than any animal she'd ever seen. Black fur streaked with silver. Shoulders high as her chest. Teeth that could snap iron. When he moved, the ground shook. Not a tremor. An actual shake like the earth recognized what was standing on it. He moved through Seraphine's corrupted wolves like they were made of paper. One leaped at his throat and he caught it in his jaws and threw it 30 feet into the trees. 2 came at him from opposite sides and he dropped low, spun, and hit them both so hard they didn't get back up. He was fast. Impossibly fast for something that size. And every movement was precise. No wasted energy. No wild swings. This was a fighter. A king who'd led wars. You could see it in the way he controlled the space around him. Alara watched from the broken wall of the cottage. She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But a bigger part of her understood. Finally, what she'd been looking at for the past 6 days. Not a broken man. Caged one. And now the cage was open. It was over in minutes. Every wolf that came at him went down and didn't get up. The clearing was silent except for his breathing and the wind moving through the trees. Seraphine stood at the edge of the clearing. She watched her entire force get dismantled. Her smile was gone. For the first time, her face showed what she actually was underneath all that calm composure. Terrified, Cale shifted back. He stood in the middle of the clearing, bare-chested, breathing hard, surrounded by fallen wolves. He looked at Seraphine. "Run," he said. She ran. He let her. That surprised Alara. She would have expected him to chase, to finish it, but he didn't. He stood there in the gray dawn light and watched the witch disappear into the trees. "Why?" Alara asked. "Because she wants me to be the monster they called me. I'm not going to give her that." He paused. "Not today. She'll face justice. But on my terms. In front of the 7 packs. Not in a dark clearing where no one sees." He turned and walked back toward the cottage. What was left of it? The door was gone. One wall had a hole the size of a cart. The hearth was still standing, and the fire still burning, somehow. Small mercies. Alara looked at the clearing, at the fallen wolves, at the broken wall, at the man walking toward her who, an hour ago, had been sitting in chains on her floor. "You could have done this the whole time," she said. "If the chains were off, you could have fought your way out of that auction. You could have escaped any time. The chains prevented it. But even chained, you threw Gregor across a room. You grabbed a sword blade with your bare hand. You could have tried harder. You could have fought every day until someone broke them." He stopped walking. He turned and looked at her. "I'd stopped fighting," he said. 3 months in chains. Beaten every day. Sold and sold again. I'd stopped believing there was anything left worth fighting for." He paused. "Then you bought me with a copper coin and cleaned my wounds and told me you couldn't feed me. And I thought, all right, one more day. I'll try one more day." She didn't know what to say to that. Her throat was tight. They sat in the wreckage. Kale on one side, Alara on the other, just like the first night. Except everything was different now. "You're a king," she said. "I was. I don't know what I am now." "You're a king," she said again, firmer this time. "I saw what you just did. That's not a man who lost his throne. That's a man who's going to take it back." He looked at her for a long time, and then he said something she didn't expect. "When I was on that auction block, I'd been captive for 3 months, beaten every day, starved, paraded through 6 different markets. Not one person looked at me, not one. They looked through me. I was just another body in chains." He paused. "Then you stopped. You looked at me, and you saw something. I didn't know what I was seeing. It doesn't matter. You saw me. That was enough." She didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't say anything. She just sat there, in her broken cottage, with a king who had no throne and a copper coin that had just changed the world. He reached across the space between them and took her hand. His grip was warm, careful, like he was holding something that mattered more than anything he'd ever held before. "There's a word for this," he said. "In my world, when a Lycan finds the one person their soul is bound to, their mate, the pull, the recognition. I felt it the moment you looked at me through that crowd. Is that why your eyes changed? At the auction?" "Yes." "And you didn't say anything?" "I was in chains. You were a stranger." What was I supposed to say? "Excuse me. I'm actually your supernatural soulmate." She almost laughed. Almost. "Fair point." He squeezed her hand. "I have to go back. My kingdom is fractured. The council that betrayed me is still in power. Seraphine will regroup. There will be a fight. A real one. Not like tonight." "I know. Come with me." She looked at the cottage. The leaking roof. The empty shelves. The garden of weeds. 2 years of being nobody in a place that wanted her gone. There was nothing here for her. There hadn't been for a long time. But his world. Wolves. Thrones. Wars between packs. She was a healer from a village that didn't want her. She had no power. No name. No standing. She'd spent the last 2 years being afraid of the baker's wife. Now she was being asked to walk into a world where witches could burn villages and kings fought wars in the shape of wolves. "I'm not a queen," she said. "No. You're the woman who spent her last coin on a stranger because she couldn't look away. You treated his wounds when you couldn't feed yourself. You refused gold from a witch because it felt wrong. That's worth more than a crown. Crowns are inherited. What you did was a choice. She sat with that. The fire crackled low. Outside, the first light of real dawn started coloring the sky. "All right," she said. "I'll come." He stood, offered his hand. She took it. They walked out of the cottage together into the morning, down the road that led away from the village. She didn't look back. There was nothing behind her worth turning around for. Ahead, the road stretched into open country. Trees gave way to hills. The sky turned pink, then gold. The same gold as his eyes. She still had the copper coin in her pocket. The last thing she'd ever owned from her old life. She closed her fingers around it and held on tight. She'd bought a man in chains with that coin. A broken slave. A nobody. Now he walked beside her. Unchained, unbroken, and hers. Not because she owned him, because she'd chosen him, and he'd chosen her back. That's how it works. The real ones. Not the ones in fairy tales where love falls from the sky and everything is easy. The real ones start in the mud, in the blood, in the moments when you have nothing left and you give it anyway. She gave her last coin. He gave her his whole world. And they walked into the dawn together. Not a king and a peasant. Not a slave and an owner. Just two people who saw each other when nobody else would. That's the story. And I think it's a good one.